Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping straight into something critical, advanced AI security. I mean, AI is everywhere now, isn't it? From your streaming recommendations to even medical tools. It's huge. But what's actually keeping these systems safe and, keeping us safe in the process? So our mission today is really to give you a shortcut, a way to get up to speed on safeguarding AI. We're doing this with a bit of a unique approach. We're using practice questions from a specialized AI security exam as our guide. Think of them less like a test and more like a really focused map. They basically boil down tons of research and real-world problems into key insights. It lets us get right to the heart of the strategies and, honestly, some surprising vulnerabilities in AI security.
Exactly. And these questions are, well, they're incredibly useful because they really zero in on what people working in this field absolutely need to know. They point us towards the most effective strategies, the ethical questions we have to grapple with, and also the ways attackers try to break these systems. Like you said, it's not about just passing an exam. It's about getting a real practical handle on the security that needs to underpin, well, our whole AI future.
Okay, let's kick things off right at the foundation then.
Yeah.
The data itself. So imagine you're teaching an AI, right? Giving it information. But what if someone's seeking in bad info, deliberately misleading it from the get-go? That's this idea of data poisoning. What makes that so tricky? And what's the best way to fight it?
Data poisoning is, it's pretty insidious because it hits the AI right where it learns in the training data. The attacker's goal is basically to make the model learn the wrong things, maybe harmful patterns or just incorrect associations. And if that foundational learning is messed up, well, the AI's decisions out in the real world, they're going to be unreliable, maybe biased, maybe just plain wrong. Our sources, the insights we're drawing from, they really emphasize that the #1 defense here is a solid data sanitization and validation pipeline.
A robust data sanitization and validation pipeline. Okay, that sounds comprehensive. Can you break that down a bit? What does that really mean? And why is it better than, say, just having lots of different data or maybe using something like federated learning?
Sure. Look, having diverse data is good, obviously. And federated learning helps too. That's where models train on data locally, without the raw data leaving its source, which spreads out the risk. But neither of those directly stop someone from injecting bad data in the first place. A pipeline, it means actively putting systems in place to check the data, to detect weird inputs, filter out malicious stuff, and stop it before it gets into the training set. It's like having a really vigilant bouncer at the door for your data. You need that proactive check, because without that solid foundation, you just can't trust the AI. Simple as that.
That makes total sense. I mean, if you're using AI for finance or healthcare or anything important, you absolutely need to trust the output. So that data integrity is just non-negotiable. Okay, so we've protected the training ground. But what about later? When the AI is built and out there, how do you know for sure it can handle a real attack? Building it well is one thing, but making sure it's tough, that's another challenge, right?
Absolutely critical challenge. And again, our sources are quite clear on this. The best way, the best practice to really test an AI's defenses against clever attacks is something called red teaming.
Red teaming. Okay, sounds a bit like a military drill for algorithms. What's involved? Why is that considered the gold standard for checking AI security against these adversarial attacks?
It pretty much is ethical hacking, but specifically for AI systems. Red teaming means you're not just passively watching, you're actively trying to break it. You design malicious inputs, you simulate the kinds of sophisticated attacks that real adversaries might use, all to see how the model holds up. So instead of just, looking at logs or checking the training data again, you're throwing curveballs at it, maybe making tiny changes to images that a human wouldn't notice but that fool the AI, or tweaking text just enough to get past a filter. It's this active offensive testing that gives you the real picture of its vulnerabilities, things you just miss otherwise. It's kind of like crash testing a car, right? You have to actually smash it up a bit to see how safe it really is.
Right, okay. So beyond just the technical defenses, there's this whole other layer, the impact on society. We hear AI fairness talked about a lot. But what does it actually look like when an AI is maybe subtly unfair, even if it seems accurate overall? How do we spot that?
Yeah, that's a really important question. Algorithmic bias often shows up exactly like that. You might have an AI system that looks great on paper, high accuracy overall, but then you dig deeper and you find it works really well for, say, the majority group, but performs much worse or makes unfair decisions for a specific minority group. The tricky part is that this can be easily missed if you only look at the big picture, the average performance. You might have 90% accuracy overall, but that hidden 10% error rate could be hitting one particular group really hard, just quietly making things unequal. And usually this comes back to the data it learned from maybe it was imbalanced or reflected existing societal biases.
So just to be crystal clear then, if you test an AI and find it's, say, great for one demographic but pretty poor for a protected group, that difference, that gap in performance.
According to our sources, yes, that's a classic sign of algorithmic bias. It's different from model drift, which is more about the model getting stale over time because the world changes. Think like an old spam filter missing new types of spam. And it's not an adversarial attack either, which is someone actively trying to manipulate it right now. Bias points to an unfairness baked into the model, probably from its training data or design.
And understanding that is so crucial because biased AI has real consequences for real people. Think about loans, job applications, even medical care. Spotting these unfair patterns is step one towards making these systems, well, actually fair for everyone. Okay, so spotting bias is one thing, but who's actually steering the ship? Who makes sure AI is used ethically inside an organization? It's got to be more than just tech checks, right? It needs to align with, like, company values.
Exactly. And this leads us straight into AI governance. Our sources actually give us some really strong guidance here, looking at it from a couple of angles that fit together nicely.
Okay, so what's the single most important thing an organization should do, governance-wise, to make sure its AI is used ethically? What's that key step?
The most vital step, consistently highlighted, is setting up an AI ethics committee. And critically, one with diverse representation. This isn't just about having an AI expert in charge. It's about bringing together people from legal, from engineering, maybe social sciences, even voices from outside the company. Why? Because that diversity provides a much broader view of potential impacts. It pushes for fairness, helps define who's accountable, and really importantly, make sure the AI's use actually fits with the organization's stated values. It's about building that ethical awareness right into the structure.
Right. And building on that, let's say a company is starting from scratch, creating its first AI policy. What's the absolute first thing they need to do to make sure that policy actually works, that it fits their goals, and how much risk they're willing to take?
Well, the very first step echoes the ethics committee idea, actually. It's about forming a cross-functional governance committee right at the start. You need leaders from the business side, from legal, from security, from tech, all in the room together. Their job, before anyone even writes rule number one, is to figure out what the policy needs to cover and make sure it aligns with the company's big picture strategy and its comfort level with risk. You absolutely need that high-level combined perspective from the very beginning.
That really drives home the point, doesn't it? Ethical AI isn't just talk. It demands real structure, real oversight, involving different parts of the business right from the get-go. Legal, strategy, security, all working together. Okay, let's shift gears a bit now into the maybe the darker side of AI security, the attack vectors. Yeah. So imagine you've got an AI built to detect fraud. Works pretty well, but then attackers figure out they can make tiny, tiny changes to their transaction data, changes a human wouldn't even spot. Just enough to trick the AI into thinking a fraudulent transaction is legit. What kind of attack are we talking about there?
That's a perfect description of an evasion attack. And the key here is when it happens. This happens during the inference phase. That means the AI is already built, deployed, and actively working. The attackers aren't messing with the training data. They're manipulating the live inputs the model is seeing right now. They subtly alter things, transaction details, maybe pixels in an image, characters in text, just enough to make the model classify it wrongly to evade detection. But cleverly. So it still looks normal to us humans.
So if our sources describe that exact scenario, fraud detection AI, attacker slightly tweaking transaction data to slip through, that's most likely an evasion attack.
Absolutely. It's a clear evasion attack, and it's important to keep it separate in your mind from data poisoning that's attacking the training data. And also different from something like model inversion, where the attacker is trying to learn secrets about the training data from the model. Evasion is all about fooling the live operational system by tweaking the input. It really shows that constant battle, attackers always probing for their subtle weaknesses.
Okay, so that's manipulating the output. But what about the flip side? What about the privacy of the data the AI learned from in the first place? Can the AI itself accidentally leak information about the people whose data was used to train it, even if you can't see the raw data directly?
Yes, unfortunately it can. And that brings us to membership inference attacks. These are a serious privacy concern. What happens here is an adversary tries to figure out if A specific person's data, like was your medical record used, was part of the original training set. They don't need the raw data. They do it by carefully watching how the model behaves, how it responds to certain inputs they craft.
So let's say there's an AI diagnosing conditions based on patient records.
Hmm?
If an attacker can use the model's predictions to figure out if, say, John Doe's specific record was in the training data, that's membership inference.
Exactly that. And you can see why that's worrying, especially for sensitive stuff like health records or financial data. Even if the attacker never sees John Doe's actual record, just knowing it was in the training set can be a privacy violation. It's a more subtle form of data leakage, but still potentially very harmful. Shows privacy can be chipped away even if the database itself is locked down.
Wow. Okay, so these privacy risks are definitely real, especially with sensitive data. What's the best tool in the toolbox then? How can we protect individual privacy in the training data, but still let the AI learn effectively?
Well, the technique that consistently comes up in our sources as the best approach for this balancing act is differential privacy. It's actually a really clever mathematical concept applied to data analysis and machine learning.
Differential privacy. How does that work? How does it hide individual data points while keeping the overall model useful?
The core idea is to inject carefully measured amounts of statistical noise during the training process. Think of it like adding a bit of randomness, but in a very controlled way. This noise makes it mathematically very difficult, ideally impossible, for someone analyzing the final model to tell whether any single individual's data was included or not. It effectively masks the contribution of any one person. But crucially, the noise is calibrated so that the model can still learn the important overall patterns from the group data, so it remains useful. It offers a much stronger privacy guarantee than just, say, removing names or restricting access. Other things like homomorphic encryption exist, which let you compute on encrypted data, but for this specific problem of protecting training data privacy, differential privacy is often seen as more practical and targeted, especially regarding computational cost.
That's fascinating. A way to learn from the crowd without revealing anything specific about anyone in it. Clever maths protecting privacy. All right, let's talk about evaluating these models. When we say an AI is good or performing well, what are we actually measuring? Particularly if we really want to avoid situations where the AI raises false alarms unnecessarily. Those can be costly or just plain annoying.
Yeah, picking the right metric is key. It depends on what you really care about avoiding. If your main goal is to minimize false positives, meaning the AI incorrectly flagged something when it shouldn't, then our sources point to precision as the metric to focus on for classification models.
Precision. Okay, so if a question asks specifically about the best metric for minimizing false positives, precision is the answer. But just quickly for folks listening, how does precision differ from other common metrics like recall or the F1 score?
Good question. So precision asks, of all the times the model said yes, predicting positive, how often was it actually correct? High precision means when it says yes, it's very likely to be right. Fewer false alarms. Think of a spam filter. High precision means fewer legitimate emails end up in your spam folder. Recall, on the other hand, asks, of all the actual yes cases out there, how many did the model manage to find? It's about minimizing false negatives, missing things you should have caught. And the F1 score is basically a combined measure, trying to balance both precision and recall. But yeah, if avoiding false positives is your top priority, like in fraud detection where accusing innocent people is bad, or some medical tests where a false positive causes anxiety, precision is the metric you'd watch closely.
Makes sense. Choose the metric that matches the real-world cost of errors. Okay, one last area. Lots of companies don't build their own AI models these days. They use AI as a service platforms, right? They subscribe, that seems efficient, but what's the big risk? What's the main headache when you outsource your AI like that?
That outsourcing introduces a whole layer of third-party risk. It's absolutely critical to manage that carefully. You're trusting another company with potentially sensitive data and with running algorithms that impact your business.
So when setting up a risk management plan for using one of these AI as a service providers, what's the single most crucial thing an organization needs to ensure they have? What's non-negotiable?
The absolute most crucial thing, according to our sources, is securing the right to audit. You need the contractual right to actually examine the provider's security controls and how they handle your data. This is way more than just reading their website or relying on their standard service level agreements, the SLAs. Those SLAs are mostly about uptime, not necessarily deep security practices. Having the right to audit means you can potentially send your own people in or at least demand detailed independent audit reports. It's about getting real transparency and making sure they're actually doing what they say they're doing to keep things secure. Accountability.
That's a really practical, powerful point. When you use an external AI service, you're inheriting their security posture, good or bad. So knowing you have the ability to actually verify their claims is essential for protecting yourself, your data, your customers. Hashtag #, outro.
You know, as AI gets more and more tangled up in everything we do, that line between what it can do, which is amazing, and how vulnerable it can be, that line keeps shifting. And it leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? How do we, all of us, as citizens, as users, make sure that the push for strong AI security actually keeps up with how fast AI is developing? And what's our role in making sure the companies building and using AI are held accountable for keeping it safe and ethical?
That is definitely something to think about. A great question for you to ponder. Thank you so much for joining us on the Deep Dive. We really hope you'll keep asking these kinds of critical questions about the AI systems you interact with every day. Until next time, stay curious.